happiness, it never lasts a day. My heart is almost breaking while I say, a good man is hard to find. You always get the other kind. Just when you think that he is your pal, you look for him and find him fooling around some other gal. Then you rave, you even crave to see him laying in his grave. So if your man is nice, take my advice and hug him in the morning. Kiss him every night, give him plenty loving, treat him right. For a good man nowadays is hard to find. A good man is hard to find. You always get the other kind. Just when you think that he is your pal, you look for him and find him fooling around some other gal. Then you rave, you even crave to see him laying in his grave. So if your man is nice, take my advice and hug him in the morning, kiss him every night, give him plenty lovin', treat him right. For a good man nowadays is hard to find.
Why, Mooney, come on in.
Hi, Aunt Alice.
Oh, let me get a good look at you, my handsome nephew.
It's so good to see you, Aunt Alice. Granddad's got the Herald for you, and he also wanted me to let you know that he got a fresh shipment of tea for you.
Oh, that brother of mine is so sweet. So I hope Chloe and everyone is well out your way.
Yes, ma'am. Mother sends her best. The family's going to the cemetery once Granddad closes the store for the day.
Oh, yes, your Uncle Henry still works at the Bank of Ripley, too. I can't thank you enough for taking me today, Mooney. But before we go, I thought we could visit for a little bit. I made your favorite cookies. So you take that in there and I'll get this in the kitchen.
This program is brought to you locally by O.J. Morrison and Company, with stores in Ripley, Spencer, and 231 Capitol Street in Charleston. You'll always find the newest merchandise in all kinds and ready to wear. Quality and style without extravagance, that's been our motto since 1891 at O.J. Morrison and Company, the big store.
Dearest Alice, may time heal your wounds. O.J. Morrison.
Aunt Alice, what is all this?
Just doesn't get any easier, Mooney. It was a dark day, a dreadful day. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I've never told you what really happened that day, have I?
No, ma'am. Just bits and pieces.
What have you heard?
Granddad told me he was a hired hand and that he lived in your house.
Yes, that's true. But there's so much more to the story. You see, Morgan never really had much of a family. His father passed away when he was just a baby, and his mother passed away when he was just 9 years old. In a way, we scratched his back and he scratched ours. We were short-handed around the farm those days. Father had died a few years ago. Mother remarried Edward Green, but then he also passed away. My brothers were quite successful and busy taking care of their own families. Still, they worried if we got along okay, especially my brother Henry.
Here's this big farm. Ma was now a widow for the second time. George, John, and I already had families of our own to care for. Jimmy was a good boy, and he tried, but he wasn't ready to take care of the livestock and crops all by himself. Here you had Johnny Morgan. He'd bounced around from farm to farm since his mama died. Mother and the girls needed the help, and John needed a roof over his head.
There's no doubt that Morgan had it rough when he was growing up, especially after his mama died. I don't think it really mattered, but Mother said folks were wrong about John's real last name.
The boy needed a place to go. What an upbringing. His daddy was Marion Raines, you know. They said that man had an awful temper. You know, he shot a man before John was born a week. His mama didn't want him to carry the name of Raines. She went and changed John's name to Morgan, but he was a Raines all right. And then old man Raines went and got himself killed by a posse. We put 3 squares on John's plate, just like us, and a place to lay his head at night. We gave that orphan the best home he ever had. Food, shelter, and a little coin in his pocket, too. He never had it so good.
John was uneasy staying here at first. Mother would say, "That boy's too poor to paint and too proud to whitewash," but we liked having him around.
It's nice having another man around. John sure does know how to work a farm all right. And he's kind of cute, too.
John was a big help around the farm. We'd get up early and feed the livestock while Alice and Tilly made breakfast. We'd put in a full day, but yeah, we had our share of fun, too. John taught me all there was to know about trapping. We'd catch a couple rabbits for dinner or we'd go fishing.
Things went fine for the first few years, but then Mother found out that John took a liking to me. Don't you know Mother shot that down right quick. Mother had grace in her heart and fire in her soul. She says, "All your brothers are successful men, and this farmhand thinks he's gonna court you? I'll not have it, no ma'am. No hired hand is gonna have the hand of one of my girls." John didn't care for that one bit. He started courting that Rebecca Hall, but truth be known, I think he married her just for spite. He was real upset about the way that Mother had treated him.
I worked like a dog for that family, and that's the thanks I get. That woman goes and shorts my pay. I don't do no good to get on her good side. She don't have one. She's so stuck up she drowned in a rainstorm. And that was some fine wedding present she went and gave us. Becca gives me this fine pocket watch, and what does the uppity old lady Green give us? The oldest nag on the farm. I done traded it and had to throw in cash to boot.
So John moves out of our house. He and Rebecca get this little place just down the road, and before long, little baby Albert comes along. That's when John really began to change. You see, he didn't know the first thing about how to take care of a wife and a baby, and I think that bothered him a bit. He was always fretting over money. He accused Mother of shorting his pay, and one time he tried to cheat your grandfather at the store.
John comes into the store with this list a week or so ago and says Mother sent him to pick up a few things. Well, I know my own mother's handwriting, but I gave him the goods anyway. It amounted to about $5 or so. I heard that John did some bad horse trading and was hurting for cash. Heck, I didn't want to see that young family of his going around hungry now.
We hadn't heard from John much after that, but then one night there's this knock at the door. It was John, and he's making up excuses to stay the night at our place. First, he says he needs to get this pattern to make a coat. Then he says he needs Tilly to cut his hair. We thought it was strange that he was here so late, but we let him stay the night anyways. Little did we know that that was the last time our family was ever going to be together.
He had done some work for Chloe on the farm, and it seems that he, at least in his mind, had not been paid or paid adequately for that. And they must have at least at some point discussed it. And his impression was maybe when they got the money, either they would or he would try again to discuss it with them. It doesn't really sound like a lot of money by today's terms, probably only about $40 or so.
She disagreed that she owed him the money, offered him $5, some old boots, some old clothes. He was angry, he left. He didn't show his anger at the time, but later on he was certainly, according to friends he was with, stomping around and carrying on. But he turned around, went back, said he needed that $5 to put on the table. Now the family never mentioned this part.
Are you ready to go to the cemetery, Aunt Alice?
Yes. Let's go pay our respects.
So, Jimmy was the first to go?
We didn't know it at the time, but Jimmy was the first. They went out together to the hog pen in the morning. When Jimmy didn't come back in, Morgan made some excuse like he was still checking the traps, but he had already done that the night before. We should have known that something was wrong. Morgan and Jimmy had almost been like brothers.
And that's when you and Aunt Matilda were in the kitchen?
We were going to make some biscuits, so we went outside to get some milk. Morgan was already in the kitchen when we got back. Before we knew it, Tilly and I were cornered, and there stands Morgan with the hatchet. We begged Morgan not to hurt us, but he struck Tilly twice. Then he hit me with that hatchet. I fell down and managed to get out of the kitchen. I hid in the wood pile in the hen house for a few minutes, then I just took off for the Chansey place as fast as I could.
So, then I guess he turned on Grandma Chloe?
My dear mother, rest her soul. I still feel the guilt, Mooney.
Why? I don't understand.
I should have went back and helped them.
And Jimmy's murder was such a frenzied kind of thing that, where the mattock was used and then the rock, and he was just bludgeoned to death. He was struck over and over again. And so it sounds as though this wasn't clean. It wasn't, okay, this is, I'll get rid of this guy. It was complete and utter destruction.
He, first of all, of course, tried to kill everyone in the house, including Alice, and did strike her and injure her fairly severely. But she was able to escape, get away, and she ran to a neighbor's house, Mr. Chansey, which wasn't very far away.
And then there's all this fighting going back and forth, and Tilly trying to get away, and Alice is screaming, and Tilly is screaming, and when Alice screams, then John comes for Alice. She's on the other side of the table. He comes around. She's thrown back across the table, gives Tilly a chance to try to run. She's scrambling on all fours out the kitchen door. She gets out on the porch and begins to scream for help. And John locks her out and comes after Alice. He's struck her on the head.
We think he probably did chase her for a little bit, because out in the garden area, or just a little bit away from the house, they found the hatchet. So he was still had the hatchet when he was going away, but he dropped it, threw it down or something, I think, when he realized that he wasn't going to get Alice and finish her off.
Word got out fast about what John had done. Next thing I knew, there were 600 people at our place. With John on the run, Grass Lick was in quite an uproar. Everyone was out looking for him. I hear Mr. Shamblin was the one who caught up with him. Some of the men were ready for a lynching right then and there, but the sheriff managed to get Morgan out of there and in to see Judge Blizzard.
I had heard about the killings by the time they brought him into the courthouse. It spread like wildfire. Based on the size and the hostile mood of the crowd, I'd say about everyone in Ripley had heard about it. I've seen vigilante justice before, and they were ready to hang him high. I told them, "Men, let the law take its course." I promised there would be swift justice, and I kept my promise.
I read the indictment in the courtroom. John F. Morgan, on the 3rd day of November, 1897, did willfully slay, kill, and murder one Chloe E. Greene against the peace and dignity of the state.
They put me up there on the stand. I just told them what we saw that morning. Me, my boy Billy, and my neighbor Ed Southall had gone down to the house, but we didn't know what we was going to find, so we had guns, loaded too. We saw Chloe lying there on the front porch. Matilda was in the parlor, and little Jimmy by the hog pen with his brains bashed in. It was a gruesome scene, all right.
Chloe was the first one we saw. That porch was a bloody mess. Her head was laying in the yard, and her feet were on the porch. She was barely breathing, but she never said a word. We went inside the house and saw Matilda. We saw where Chloe's bedroom door had been bashed in. That poor woman was almost blind, you know, but I'd say she put up a fight.
I had been called to the scene as the county coroner. Personally, I'm saying that John F. Morgan was bad in the head when he committed those murders. It was crucial for my case for that to come out when Sheriff Shin testified. So I asked him about Morgan's mental condition when they caught and handcuffed them.
His actions were very strange. Morgan was making a hissing noise and tearing at his clothes. Once in a while, he would let out a howl. Some of the men were giving him a rough time, and he spit at them. He was grinning and hissing, but some of the men thought he was just putting on an act.
That courtroom was packed, but you could have heard a pin drop when I walked in to testify. I knew Morgan was sitting there, but I never looked at him. I don't recall much from that day, but I told the jury that I remember Tilly calling for me.
I could sense that Alice Post made a big impact on the jury. I mean, here's an attractive woman who comes in with her head all bandaged, and she had just lost 3 family members. I had to get back to the insanity defense. I put Mrs. Morgan on the stand. She was very upset and very nervous, but she's the innocent, faithful wife, and she's holding little 9-month-old Albert in her arms. She had told me that Morgan had not been acting right for several months.
John would have these strange flighty spells in the night. I recall this one time that he got up from his sleep, got a gun and went out on the porch and shot it off. The noise woke him and he came back in the house. Another time he screamed just wild and wicked. He had these strange spells in the daytime too. John changed a great deal in the last 6 months. He would leave home at all hours and it was like he wasn't really there when he was home.
It only took the jury 1 hour to decide, and then Morgan makes this desperate plea.
We, the jury, hereby find the defendant, John Ferguson Morgan, guilty as charged.
We will have quiet in this courtroom. The defendant has the right to speak his piece and to be heard. Please proceed, Mr. Morgan.
I am not the man that did this crime. I ain't the man that did the murder. Some people tells me I signed a paper. I might have signed it. I don't dispute that. But if I did, I have no recollection of it. I stayed in their home for 5 years, 5 months, and 15 days. Many a thing was done for me in the way of life's comfort, and many things I have done for them. What I have told you people here is the truth. God being my helper, I prayed to God this morning and all night that he might give me strength and quiet my nerves, that I might be able to come up here and tell the truth about this matter. Gentlemen, I did not do this crime.
All that was left was the sentencing, and I think everybody knew that the world would soon be shed of John Ferguson Morgan.
The court has no eyes to see, no tongue to speak, no heart to feel, but that is given him by the law. You have had a fair, full, and impartial trial. In this moment, you should be very grateful to that wife who has clung to you through this ordeal. It would have required more courage for that woman to have faced a lion's den than to have faced the public. She has honorably done so, and is one monument to the character of a noble womanhood. The sentence of this court is that you shall be confined in the county jail until the 16th day of the coming December, 1897. And on that day you shall be taken from the jail by the sheriff and hanged by the neck until you are dead, dead, dead. And may God have mercy upon your soul. Court is adjourned.
It wasn't uncommon for that time period to have justice very swiftly done. And in this case, they had caught the man. He had admitted at different points doing it. And it was a triple murder, which was pretty much unheard of in this area.
They backed off, but they didn't go away. They patrolled the streets. They were in the courtroom. They intimidated the judge. They intimidated the jury. One headline read, "Mob bulldozes the judiciary," after it was all over and done with. He committed his crimes on a Wednesday, was caught very shortly after. By Thursday, he was indicted. By Friday, he had had his trial. It was all over with. The jury went to deliberation after about 2 hours of testimony, came right back, and the next day he was sentenced. That's pretty swift.
After his sentencing, they took Morgan to jail. That's when Mr. Morrison interviewed him for the book. O.J. was always searching for his next nickel. He agreed to give Morgan's wife $25 and gave Morgan his hanging suit in exchange for telling his story.
That was one of my better business decisions. I knew there was going to be a huge gathering for the hanging, and everyone was going to know about O.J. Morrison and his department store. Yes, it proved to be a fine investment. As for Morgan, it was important for him to know that he could care for his wife and his child. And you know, he told me that suit from my store was the first new suit and shoes that he ever owned.
You see, O.J. was an ambitious man. Everyone knew it.
Mr. Morrison constantly wanted to confer with my notes from the trial. He must have read the documents 3 or 4 times. He told me that he intended to catch a steamboat for Cincinnati, get it published, and sell it back here at the hanging December 16th. That Mr. Morrison sure was an ambitious man.
My family had shopped in his store like everyone else in town. He knew I was a photographer and he hired me to work for him. He wanted photographs of everyone who was involved with the trial and everyone in the Post family. I even photographed his wife, Rebecca, and their little boy when they visited Morgan right there in the jailhouse. All of those photographs took quite a bit of time, but it was more interesting than a family portrait, and well, Mr. Morrison paid me quite handsomely.
So Mr. Morrison went on his way downriver to Cincinnati to get his book published. In the meantime, Sheriff Shin wanted to make sure everything was in order because the hanging was just 2 weeks away.
Doug, go over to old man Progler's place. The man can make anything. Tell him to drop what he's doing and get over here. I need him to build a scaffold. And stop by Vale's too. We're gonna need a casket. Nothing fancy, mind you.
My family has been in this business for more than 50 years, but we've not come across a situation like this. Sheriff Shin is going to have to come up with something pretty quickly.
That valley out on the Charleston Pike with that Indian Mound is a natural theater. Everyone's going to be able to see, and it's almost ready. Progler is building faster than green grass through a goose. Says there's supposed to be 13 steps. I guess it's 12 for the jury and 1 for the judge.
Want a chaw?
Hey, thanks.
So, you from around here?
Nah, I done rode in from Calhoun County. Came out here and that old man hired me to work. Fired that other guy for being drunker than Cootie Brown.
Yeah, me too. Work on the river and ain't been home in a coon's age. Folks at the dock down at the Ripley landing was a-talking about the hanging. Up and quit and hitched a ride over here. I ain't never seen a hanging afore.
I can't understand half of what he's saying, but I swear he's busier than a moth in a mitten. That old man can outwork us all, young bucks.
I guess Sheriff Shin got distracted because Morgan didn't stay in his cell very long. You know, Father used to say, it's easier to do a job right than have to explain why you didn't. Well, let me tell you, those jailers sure learned that lesson the hard way.
Brother, you're not going to believe this. I don't know how, but Morgan has escaped. I swear he's not in a jail. Riley and Jewel ain't seen hiding her hair of him. He said he must have got out somehow during the shift change.
What? For love of, get the posse rounded up, and I mean right now. I want that man found, I want him alive too. Be careful out there, he may be armed. He's a desperate man, and Lord knows what he might do. Check his place out on Grass Lick and his wife's family out on Poverty Ridge too. He couldn't have gone too far yet.
There was a series of mistakes made. They didn't lock the inner cell bar door as they were told to do, but he was just going across the hall to get a cup of coffee. He was going right back.
He just got up and walked around the cage and out the unlocked door.
He simply outfoxed everybody.
John had escaped jail and was on the run. He headed down and made his way over into Roane County. They found him a fair piece over in Walton about 3 days later, and it wasn't over then either. There was this big argument with the law and Spencer. The sheriff in Roane County didn't want to turn Morgan over, but Sheriff Shin was having none of that.
A good checkers player is always plotting his next move. I ain't bad at checkers neither. Heck, I was about ready for Sheriff Shin to fetch me back. I done felt like I'd been chewed up and spit out.
There had been so much publicity that had taken place after his escape and recapture, that it sparked interest all up and down the East Coast in newspapers that had picked up the story. And so there was a lot of people in town anticipating this hanging. Would he escape again? He'd already sworn that he wouldn't hang on the 16th of December. Was that going to happen again?
So there was Punch and Judy shows in which they were chasing, the puppets were chasing each other around with hatchets.
It was filled with excitement, and there was different things going on. There was even a small theatrical troupe that had come into Ripley.
It was a carnival, a complete carnival.
The whole town was fired up as the hanging got closer. I could hear the crowd from right there on the porch. All the hotels were full. People were staying in the schoolhouse and stables, about anywhere they could. Your Uncle Henry told me there were men sleeping out by the gallows trying to get a good spot for the execution. Most folks were just wanting to watch a man die, but I've heard there was more going on. Some were trying to cash in on my family's misfortune. John Darst from Mount Cottageville was trying to make a name for himself down in Charleston. He was really interested in everything going on.
Debate over public executions is not something new in the halls of the state capitol. Some argue that it's a deterrent to those who may be contemplating similar actions. Others say it's gruesome and barbaric. Perhaps my Jackson County neighbors will decide the issue.
People came from all around to witness the hanging. Reporters from New York, Baltimore, all the big cities, and the train had way more passengers than it could handle.
There's the 9 o'clock pulling in the depot with another train load. Hey Doug, maybe we better practice that noose one more time.
It's going to work just fine, James. That Fayette County Sheriff said he's done used it 3 times, and it hasn't failed him yet. I'm telling you, it's a proven rope.
I heard Henry talking about all the excitement in town. My goodness, there were people selling all kinds of trinkets.
I've been a photographer in this town for several years. Father was not keen on the idea, but he also knows I would not have been a photographer if I had not been there. I mean, this is big news. The New York Sun is even here to cover it. Besides, I'd already taken a dozen photographs or more of Mr. Morrison. It was important for me to finish the job.
And then there was Morgan, sitting there in the jail with Rebecca and the preachers, counting down the days.
Okay, John, we're gonna sing another song. Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
I was a-thinking, I'm all gussied up here in this fine new suit and shoes too. You know, preacher, I had a good wife. She was always good and kind to me. She gave me this here fine pocket watch as a wedding present. I wanted to give my boy the fine things I never did have. My Becca talked to me time and time again about my soul's salvation. If only I'd listened to her, I might not be in such a condition today. I ask God to forgive me for the way I have done.
It's time to go, John.
By that time, I'd say that John F. Morgan had accepted his fate. People from all around showed up, yelling at him and all. It was quite the spectacle.
My goodness, James, will you look at that crowd? It looks like a Casto reunion on the 4th of July around here. How many would you guess? 5,000? Hey, Judge Blizzard's already up there, and he's brought that pretty stenographer lady, too.
Some people made a big to-do about a woman being up there on the scaffold. I had a job to do, and I did it. I thank Judge Blizzard for the opportunity. I may be the first female stenographer in the state, but I surely will not be the last.
Finally, it was time. The preachers went on. They didn't want to be outdone by the others in front of a huge crowd like that. All eyes were locked on Morgan up on the gallows with the noose around his neck. At any moment he would be hanged.
I'm a plain-spoken man, but I ask God to forgive me. My desire is to go from this world to a better one. May God forbid that no one ever harbors an evil thought of this kind in their hearts. I'm thankful to the sheriff, jailer, and guards for the way they have treated me. I'm thankful to the preachers who have called on me, prayed with me, and led me in the way of a better life. I pray to God that he may take care of my dear wife and child. I reckon his brings this all to a close, and I bid you farewell.
Farewell, John.
Just as fast as he committed the murders, he was hanged. John Ferguson Morgan. I know that he was a husband and a father. He was so young, but he did wrong. He murdered my brother, my sister, my mother, and the time was here for him to meet his maker.
So, what did they do with his body?
Morgan's lifeless body was unwanted by the community. They tried to bury him on the farm of Rebecca's family, but her father refused. The local church would not accept his body either. Instead, he is buried on a farm near Fairplain, and that was owned by a member of Sheriff Shin's family. His grave is unmarked. That's enough for now, Mooney. I'm tired. Let's go home.
My Aunt Alice Post lived the rest of her life in Ripley with the family of her surviving brothers and sisters. Alice died at the age of 75. She never married. Sadly, I never got to meet my Uncle Jimmy or my Aunt Tilly. They were cut down that day along with my great Aunt Chloe. The family endured 3 funerals on November 3rd, 1897. John Morgan's wife, Rebecca, reverted back to her maiden name of Hall. She died in 1945 at age 74. Morgan's son, Albert, would marry and have 2 children. He was a patient at Spencer State Hospital when he died in 1942. Rebecca and Albert share a common headstone in the cemetery of Fairview Church. James Owen Shin had been sheriff of Jackson County for less than a year when the murders took place. He completed 2 terms as sheriff and also served 2 terms in the West Virginia legislature. After the hanging, we would purchase 400 acres of the Pfost-Greene farm on Grass Lick. He died in 1947 at 89 years of age. Reuben Shin, who was known as Doug, also became involved in politics, serving 2 terms as sheriff of Jackson County. In 1921, he was elected to the state senate, a position he held until his death in 1923. He was 62. After serving as circuit judge, Reese Blizzard was appointed U.S. District Attorney by Presidents William McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt. He died in 1941 at the age of 78. David A. Brown served both as the Jackson County coroner and as John Morgan's defense attorney. He died a year after the trial at age 44. Prosecuting attorney James Seaman would be elected twice to the state legislature. He served as Speaker of the House in Charleston from 1907 to 1909. Anna McVeigh was the first female courtroom stenographer in West Virginia. Little is known about her whereabouts after the Morgan hanging. O.J. Morrison would build a business comprised of 15 clothing stores across West Virginia. For the book rights to Morgan's story, he paid his widow, Rebecca, $25 and gave John a new suit for the hanging. His book sold at the hanging crowd for 25 cents a copy. Morrison passed away in 1952 at the age of 83. Susan King was among the first female photographers in the region. She documented important events such as the arrival of the first train in Ripley and Morgan's hanging. She died in 1936 at the age of 72. Major Charles Henry Progler was a Swiss immigrant and a Civil War veteran. He owned enterprising businesses in Ripley, building churches, businesses, and homes. Many are still in use today. He was contracted to build Morgan's Gallows at age 68. Joseph Robert Vail continued the family's business. Established in 1844, Vail Furniture in downtown Ripley remains one of the oldest family-owned furniture stores in America. John S. Darst served 2 terms in the House of Delegates. He led the legislation to ban public executions in West Virginia. Darst later served in the state senate and as state auditor. He died in 1936 at age 75. There would be 85 hangings in the state penitentiary before capital punishment was outlawed in the state. As for me, I proudly served my country as a sergeant in World War II. receiving 2 bronze stars and a presidential citation. It's true that blood is thicker than water. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family.
It was the last public hanging in Ripley. They all came from miles just to see a young man on the run, a murderer's son. With a hatchet he killed them all 3. Born and raised in old Jackson County, a small man of just 5'4", a hired hand to work on the land, but he won't need those hands anymore. And there's nowhere to hide. Yeah, the hound's on your trail. The lawman's gonna ride. Better say your farewells. The gallows are high, and the road there is long. The end's drawing nigh. Hear the hanging man's song. He was locked up that night there in Ripley, put away in the old county jail. Said he'd not hang again, over he sang, as he planned his escape from his cell. With his pillow he fashioned a dummy, so no one would know he was gone. Clever for sure, he just walked out the door. For 2 days and nights he would run. There's nowhere to hide. Yeah, the hound's on your trail. The lawman's gonna ride. Better say your farewells. The gallows are high, and the road there is long. The end's drawing nigh. Hear the hanging man's song. The onlookers came a day early as they fought in the local town square. A gala of sorts, they shared spirits by courts, although there was death in the air. Sheriff Owen addressed the crowd briefly. He assured he'd be starting on time if they just move around to the old hanging ground. John Morgan would pay for his crime. He said, mistakes of my life have been many, and the sins of my heart have been more. I don't want to see no one weeping for me, for I'm knocking at the old devil's door. There's nowhere to hide. Yeah, the hound's on my trail. The lawman's gonna ride. I better say my farewells. The gallows are high, and the road there is long. The end's drawing nigh. Hear the hanging man's song. The end's drawing nigh. Hear the hanging man's song.